fine.
Adam Lubbock, welcome to the podcast. Lubsy, as you're known. You've been a personal trainer for 13 years now, and you're the proud owner and founder of ADVHQ, Henley-on-Thames' #1 training facility, or as they call it, Henley's Health Hub. And you're an incredibly proud husband and father of one, and soon to be two, so congratulations. You've made multiple speaking gigs and guests on podcasts, and you talk around multiple topics from health and fitness to running your own business with your wife to alcoholism, autism, and a lot of things in between. Your self-proclaimed quote on your Instagram bio, I think probably sums you up the best, which is, "I'd rather rub you up the wrong way with truth than butter you up with bullshit." And we're going to look into that a lot more later, because I think there's a lot of that with British culture, particularly. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. What an incredibly cool place.
It's all right, isn't it?
I feel very lucky to be here. I feel like a real podcaster.
There you go. Well, you've been on many podcasts recently, haven't you?
Well, the world hasn't woken up yet, but I'm just waiting to get found out. I'm sure it won't be long, so I'll enjoy this one. Might be the last.
Have you come across the pod before, or have you listened to any of our episodes and stuff?
I came across it because of the one you did with Ben Earl. I played rugby for many years, did the classic self-proclaimed semi-pro thing, which everyone likes to call themselves, but bottom line is you're just a rank amateur who was nowhere near good enough to make it, and you might make 50 quid every now and then. Stopped playing a long time ago, to be honest, and haven't really kept a massively close eye on rugby since. Got other things going on. Keen cricketer and things like that. Just played at Wormsley. For any cricketers out there, that's a pretty cool place to play. But I came across the episode with Ben Earl and his psychologist, Callum Clark, who was also a pro, right? But he's gone into...
he was a pro at Saracens, and then he retired playing, and then he was head of psychological performance at Saracens.
Yeah, that's right. So I thought that was a rather interesting progression, because, you know, the classic is to go into coaching, or more of a kind of... There is usually a more linear progression from playing to after playing, or they just bin it off entirely. But I thought that was a rather interesting... I mean, it's not a tangent, it's obviously related, but...
it was
fascinating for two rugby players. You know, no one's going to get someone like, if you like, Ben Earl better than, you know.
Yeah, and hearing that insight of how they work together.
Yeah,
because it's one thing interviewing someone one-on-one, but having them both there talking about that, you know, how they interrelate. And I think it's just so cool now watching Ben. I mean, he's
having a great World Cup.
He's having a great World Cup, and you know, slid into his DMs a few times, said, "Well done, mate," and he's replied saying, you know, "Cheers, Charlie." You know, it's really cool, and it's so interesting to see that insight and hearing him talk on the podcast of like how he goes about things and how that has sort of translated onto the pitch. And you know, you hear even Johnny Wilkinson. I posted a snippet on Instagram, even listening to Johnny Wilkinson talking the other day about drop kicking. And you know, you hear these guys at elite sport and elite performance, they talk about, the technique, the strategy, yes.
I saw the same
but
clip.
The promised land is having the power over your mindset and emotions. That's what is the difference, I think.
But I saw the same clip, and they asked him about the drop goal, and he didn't really mention kicking a ball once, and he spoke for about a minute and a half. It was just about being present, you know, emotionally, physically, in every way, to enjoy and embrace the experience. He's very interesting to listen to.
Johnny Wilkinson?
Yeah, he's sort of really... I mean, he's honing in on it, and every now and then I'm like, all right, Johnny, I get it. But you know, it's... And obviously for someone of sort of my age, that World Cup was massively instrumental.
Hugely inspirational, you know, wasn't it? Those guys are legends.
He was the guy on my wall. So
Adam, I want to hear a bit more about your background. This podcast is really, you know, it's all about making change and adversity and personal development, and, you know, coming from all the way over there to all the way over here. And a lot of the time, and I think it's really important for listeners to know that, you know, one doesn't need to have some severe crisis or adversity in their life, but, you know, a lot of this self-development, personal development stuff is just for, you know, universal everyday things that generally people want to make progress or be successful or change the way they feel internally or the world around them. So let's rewind 10, 15, 20 years. Tell us a little bit about where you came from.
So I am the son of two professional musicians, which is already unique in itself. And then my younger brother of 18 months was diagnosed with severe autism when he was about 18 months. So I was 3. So too young to remember life without. and we won't go into the controversy of it all, but basically started off life okay. Something happened, and then he wasn't. So not only
What's his name, your brother?
Ali.
Ali.
And he's become the absolute figurehead of, well, there's not a better word than inspiration, but there's an awful lot more than he's given me than that: tolerance, perspective, patience when it's due. Otherwise, it's the complete opposite. And so with that sort of triad, or that sort of household, the chances of just falling into place and doing the generic go to school, do your A levels, go to uni, get a job, buy a house, die was definitely not. Wasn't really ever going to happen. But it also completely, almost via osmosis, gave me this very, I would say, we can't be very unique, this unique perspective on the world, being so close to someone that had been given such a tough hand through no fault of their own. It was only when I kind of got into my sort of early 20s, like my real sort of adulthood, that I really started to compute what was going on, because I remember being quite frustrated as a child, just not really figuring out why it was I was just not seeming to be on the same page as many of my other peers. And I don't mean in a good or a bad way, but just
different.
I was just not getting a lot of this stuff. Absolutely terrible student. But, actually sometimes being a bad student actually really helps, because it at least narrows down your options. If I was quite good, they would have probably sent me to uni and I'd have got quite a good degree and quite a good subject and gotten quite a good job and lived quite a good life and then died. But then, I was lucky that I sort of had to start thinking about it quite early. So really, I've said this once or twice. There was never a kind of moment that was like, I need to change, or I'm not saying that I was perfect. That's not the angle of which I'm coming from. But there wasn't a moment where I, woke up in a car with, shit in my pants, having drunk and drugged myself up to oblivion or whatever. And I always say that sometimes growing up with a disabled sibling, it sort of relinquishes your chance to learn from your mistakes, and you there's too much going on. There's your parents are going through enough. You're witnessing what life can be, how difficult life can be through no fault of your own. So you're very acutely aware from a young age that you just don't bring shit on to yourself if you don't have to, because I have a massive responsibility and obligation to my family, my brother, the world, whatever you want to call it, for making the most of the opportunity that I was given, that I could have so easily not been given. And it's the way I would describe it actually is a bit like, when you watch comic relief or sport relief, and they have these, incredibly emotional stories, and, UK and elsewhere, and the spectrum's massive, people starving, cancer, whatever. And it's a good night, and you donate your 10 quid or whatever, and you turn it off and you sit back and you go, I need to stop being such a dick. I'm so lucky. And then by the next day, you're fuming because they don't have the right smoked salmon, or your ski trip's been cancelled again. It's like gone straight away. It was almost like that never quite left. That's been the fuel, for an awfully long time. But it was only when I started to kind of fully understand why and what that was, sort of in my early 20s, was I able to sort of truly harness it. Before that, it was just a bit kind of, I couldn't really channel any of it. I was just trying lots of everything and getting incredibly mediocre at all sorts of things. And then I started to just sort of refine it and chop it down. But that's, what you do.
And how did you do? What was that refining process like? Are you talking about refining and chopping down to eventually realize that you want to go into the health and fitness space and open the gym? Or, how did that come about?
No, I was pretty lucky that I was fairly certain that this was the kind of line of work I wanted to go into. I mean, don't get me wrong. My dream to be a professional sportsman was, well, I wouldn't say alive, actually. Looking back, it was always dead. I never had a chance. But the point was, it was still something I was gunning for until I was sort of 18, 19, until you realise that that's gone. But I always knew that personal training, maybe tennis coach, something with people, something with where I got to wear shorts to work was probably going to be a good direction for me. But I was still playing sort of a couple of different sports at not a particularly good level, but quite a good level to be playing them all at the same time. I was a football coach in a primary school. I was a private tennis coach and doing this group session on a Saturday morning. Then I was trying to be a PT. I was also doing house to house. I didn't have a sort of place of residence. I don't mean a house. I mean, like, I didn't have a gym where I was going to. So it was just a bit all over the gaff, but it was a very good apprenticeship for me, I must say. And I am thankful for it massively. But it was actually when I basically had my first serious relationship and I sort of immersed myself in another world, another person's family, another person's sort of mind and soul, that I suddenly realised what are the things that make me me and why that is. And therefore I was able to start honing in on the sort of life that I wanted to at least try and build, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. Just going back to talking about when you were at school and, you know, you were good at things and weren't good at other things. I saw this great thing the other day where, you know, someone was talking about their experience at school and how, you know, if you're doing really well in English and really shit at chemistry, they're like, oh, you've got to have extra chemistry.
Yeah.
You've got to have extra chemistry. You're like, no.
Because that's what the world needs, someone who's shit at chemistry.
Yeah. Or average at everything or whatever. And he's like, no. They should have been like, don't go to chemistry. Yeah. Go and just go and do English. Just do English and be great at that. Yeah. No one wants anyone that's shit at chemistry.
Well,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's someone very famous, sort of entrepreneur, that always says that school failed him.
Yeah.
Not that he failed school, and I fall into that, or I feel like I sort of fall into that bracket somewhat.
Tell me a little bit about alcohol and alcoholism. I've seen, you know, that you talk about that a lot. Is there any personal background there? Is it more because you see, you know, the benefits of people who are in your gym, etc.? Talk to me about, you know, where's that interest come from?
Well, first and foremost, I never talk about alcoholism because I'm not qualified to do that. It's obviously that's its own thing, and I was never an alcoholic, whatever. However, the topic of alcohol, you know, there's a couple of guys I've been lucky enough to connect with who run a great app called Dry, Andy Ramage and Matt Pink. They talk about this middle lane drinking. They've sort of coined the term, and it turns out that's what I was talking about too, hence why we've sort of connected. So it's never about the addiction side. It's about pretty much everything else.
Okay.
Now,
what is that?
Well, it's basically people who occasionally drink a lot at weekends, think it's not a problem. It's basically the world who, apart from the odd person who actually says, I don't drink. Everyone else is in this sort of, they're not an addict, they're not teetotal. It's in their lives. Every now and then it takes over more often than, it's quite a large middle lane. The perspective in which I came from it originally was incredibly simple. I'm a health and fitness, I like to call myself, as well as a PT, gym owner, whatever, I like to coin the whole thing as a health and fitness ambassador. And if I'm not going to be an ambassador for all things health and fitness, then I am letting down my corner of society that I'm supposed to be representing. So it's actually, first and foremost, an incredibly logical and simple message. There is nothing about alcohol that makes you healthy, healthier, or fitter. So I'm obviously not going to go on about it, mainly because the rest of the world is already doing incredibly well at getting you to drink too much. So if I start doing it as well, then we've got real problems. Now, that's obviously been fueled by the fact, now I don't know how much of this stuff you sort of come across on the internet or whatever, but in my industry now, it is alcohol as a tool to relate to their audience is absolutely rife. It's almost extraordinary because the industry now, actually it's the same for lots of industries, but, you know, relatability is an incredibly powerful marketing tool. When you can relate to something or someone, it makes it more marketable, right? This is...
So how does the health and fitness industry use alcohol to relate to the mass market?
Instead of dismantling it and just taking it, I don't mean taking it apart in terms of just like tearing it down, but just assessing it for what it is, which is basically a drug that's very addictive. It's a depressant. It affects your sleep. It adds nothing to your health and fitness. What they do is they talk about how to get fit without giving up any of your favourite things, i.e. wine. Or if you're trying to lose fat, instead of drinking beer, drink vodka, lime and soda because there are less calories in it, as if the calories in vodka are the problem, or I should say, as if the calories in beer, are the problem, as if that's, why you end up pissing in the middle of the street at 3 a.m. because you've had too many calories. It's a drug that's intoxicated your brain. So that's one way. Then they also promote themselves drinking. Again, just playing on that whole relatability side. Maybe there was a long time where personal trainers were just deemed as these sort of like untouchable gods who were just all massive, shredded chicken and broccoli wielding wankers. I don't really know, and maybe people got sick to death of it. But this whole "I'm just like you" thing has almost completely taken over. And my issue with it is that, well, yeah, you want to relate to your PT in some respects, like I love my mum, you love your mum, sweet, we get on that way, we relate in that way, we have a family, whatever. But if you relate to me completely, well, you may as well just pay yourself 40 quid a week and just keep doing exactly what you're doing. But it goes back to my initial point. We all have certain pockets of society that we have a responsibility to represent well. Now, my pocket is health and fitness. My dad's a conductor of an orchestra, right? His pocket is music. If he was to, in order to relate to more people, go, yeah, classical, I get you, classical music's a bit boring, we're going to do a few more pops that's not going to do classical music any favours. It's already on its arse as it is. People don't give it enough time. The last thing we need is people who actually care about it to also drag it through the mud. And I think when these pockets that we are supposed to represent start letting them down or start not fulfilling their obligations, it really does lead, I think, to quite a dangerous.
So what's your advice around alcohol? If I signed up to your gym tomorrow and we sit down and I'm booze just as much as everyone else and have quite a sort of medium diet and nutrition, whatever, like, what are you going to tell me about my alcohol habits?
My advice, if you're going to ask me, is I'm going to say don't drink. Pretty obvious. Now, I'm not going to say that you can't join if you don't drink. I'm not going to say you're a bad person if you don't drink. If you want to go into it and we can talk about the societal and the cultural connotations that come with it that you can't help but then dive into and try and dismantle, that's fine. But I'm not going to, that goes back to the quote, right? I don't want to butter you up with bullshit. Oh, it's fine. Just, is it beer you like, is it? All right, try and just cut down to 3 days a week and instead of beer, have vodka, lime and soda. See how that goes. Well, of course, what will happen is you'll have 3 vodka, lime and sodas. Your inhibitions will go out the window. Whatever idea you had for being healthy will fuck off quicker than you can say double vodka Red Bull. And then before you know it, it'll be 1 a.m. and you'll be face first in a kebab and the whole thing will have gone to shit.
How does that advice tend to work with some of your clients? I know I'm asking you to generalize quite a bit, but you're coming out of this from, you see a lot of people coming into the gym and, wanting to get into good habits, whether it's eating, drinking, fitness, right? How does that advice go? What's the difference between people that stick to things and don't? What's the difference between people that take exactly what you say and stop drinking or don't?
So I think what it is what I'm trying to do. One, it gets actually received quite well. Remarkably well.
I think people appreciate being told it as it is.
I think we'll come at it from the 2 angles in which I'm sort of trying to deal with it. So you've got the one hand where you've got the kind of personal relationship aspect. And, I think it's David Goggins who says it, who I know is kind of become a meme and parody of himself, but there are a couple of quotes that are very good. And he always says that I would much rather you don't like me and improve than like me and stay the same. And that's kind of it summed up in a nutshell. And it's a bit like my quote, right? This is partly why, part of the problem with personal training and gym ownerships and all the rest of it is that it is someone's job. And sometimes it could be 10 members could be the difference between you going under and being okay. And if that's the case, which, being a personal trainer, it all looks great because we're swanning around in shorts all day and drinking coffees and blah, blah, blah. But, it's not that hard. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. And you can often be 1 or 2 clients away from going under. And if that is you, of which it was for a long time, it's very difficult for that one client who's the one that could be the difference between you paying rent and not, to be brutally honest with them and risk losing them. It's difficult. Now, luckily, I've gotten to a point now where we can. and we have enough backing in order to do so, and I have enough confidence, and I've got a bit of age on my side. I'm not 21 anymore. I'm not 24. I've got a child. Don't get me wrong. I've got a long way to go, but it definitely helps. But what's interesting, and particularly in what I do in terms of owning a gym instead of going online and just dealing with people via emails, is if I am willing to basically put your business on the line in pursuit of truth and you genuinely becoming better, if we can get over that hurdle, your buy-in is going to be 10 times more than it was going to be if I wasn't going to put any hurdles in your way whatsoever. Right? If I was just going to feed you shit and say, right, in 6 weeks we'll get you in the shape of your life without giving up any of your favourite things, again, something that needs to be dismantled. We'll come back to it later. Bottom line is, if they really were your favourite things, they wouldn't have led you to calling me, because they wouldn't have sent you down a bad alley, right? But anyway, it's a very interesting, it's almost a case study that I get to experience every day. Now, I'm not saying that everyone knocks drinking on the head, but it's like, I feel like it's almost like there's someone in their corner for the day where it does get too much, or the night that does go wrong, or they need someone to turn to, or somewhere to turn to and go, I'm not sure if this drinking is working for me. They've got one. They've got someone to go free of judgment without calling them a pussy because they're not drinking, actually, who will give them a handshake and a hug and say, big respect to you. I'm with you all the way. This is what I did if it helps. I've been on sober stags. I've done sober weddings. You need any advice? I'm here. But ultimately, I am your health and fitness coach. I have a massive responsibility as someone in your life because you've entrusted me with that. And so I'm not going to let you down under that pretense, at least. I might let you down in some other ways. My joke might miss the spot, or outside of the gym, fine. We might disagree on other things. But when it comes to your health, I care way more about it than whether or not you like me. 100%. The other way in which, or it's a sort of an analogy really, when you're learning how to drive and your driving teacher is doing you nothing because they're like, hands at 10 to 2, mirror, signal, maneuver, don't yank the handbrake up, click the thing in because it will wear away, make sure you're neutral, doing your head in, and you're like, I'm never going to drive like this. But the reason why they do that is because someone's got to teach you how to drive properly. Now, they're fully aware, just like I am. I'm not up my own arse enough to know that every time I say don't drink, someone's not going to. Just like your driving instructor's fully aware, as soon as you learn how to pass your test, that 10 to 2 is going pretty quick. But they've done all they can to instill some sort of good habit that means enough of them will stay for you to be a good driver. If they, when they're teaching you how to drive, say, yeah, you should have your hands at 10 to 2, but actually instead what's cooler is if you just put your hand on top and you rest your left hand on the side and, check the mirror every now and then, but you'll be all right, whack the tunes up, looking cool, shades on. When you do actually come around to passing your test, you'll probably try and wrap your knob around the wheel and try and drive like that because it's like, well, why the hell not, Like there's been absolutely no standard set anywhere. So that's the sort of analogy I would use. So I don't really care. It's like the teacher at school. You might like that teacher, but if they get you a C, let's just pretend that we're into school for a second. You like that teacher, they get you a C. You don't like that teacher, they get you an A. That gets you to where you want to go. In 10 years' time, you're going to look back and you're going to go, yeah, he was fun,
of course,
but didn't do anything for me, actually. And he fucking rid me hard, but he got me exactly what I needed. And I look back on school too, and I think of those teachers that did my head in and actually got me at least to college. And I think about those teachers who indulged me and let me go into the library and watch YouTube. And it was fun at the time, but actually you didn't have my best interest. You just couldn't be asked.
So did you used to drink and give up drinking?
Yeah, I used to drink. Briefly touched upon.
Sure, that's not vodka you're pouring.
No. Imagine.
As he says.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not the one with the problem. No. I used to drink like anyone, but I was always very aware that these two things don't go. Like you just can't be a PT and glorify getting pissed.
Fine. But what about people that are, do want to try and give up or even just taper it down? It is very hard in this country, particularly trying to stop drinking altogether, because most people drink, most social events revolve around drinking. there's a little bit of shaming even if you go to the pub and you ask for a soda and lime, the barman's pretty much laughing, taking the piss out of you with your mates.
Yeah.
You do need a lot of resilience.
Yeah, you do.
And I don't really drink much. I've got myself to a point where I have the odd tequila or the odd shandy or the odd glass of red wine. But sometimes I definitely go to an event or to another. I'm definitely not drinking, but then I end up having a couple of something and still regret it the next day. So how does one overcome that?
Well, first and foremost, you need to acknowledge how terrible that is. I don't mean that you succumb to it, but just the fact that that is the constructs of which our society is built off. And it's I would like to just, let me just add, if we had a mental and physical health epidemic because of addictive egg and cress sandwiches, I'll be going after them, right? It's not to do with pubs or anything specific. It's just, unfortunately...
Yeah, no, you go for it, Adam.
Do you know what I mean?
Go for it.
The world's on fire. If everyone had the shits and people were eating raw chicken for dinner, I'd be going after that, But, and I would love to leave it at that. Don't get me wrong. I would love to just be like, look, it's not very healthy. It doesn't make you healthy. It doesn't make you fit. Move on. But unfortunately, you can't do that with this topic because it's so unbelievably intertwined to almost everything we do. So first and foremost, it's important to actually recognise that, because we're aware of it, but what we don't do is kind of dismantle it enough to try and truly address it. And then you realise it's wrapped up in a whole host of self-worth and confidence issues. And you've got the text, which is everybody drinks, or I need to lose weight, I need a calorie deficit. That's the text. But then your subtext is, well, why have we ended up in this place? Is this a self-worth issue? Is it a self-respect issue? Is it a self-esteem issue? Is it a cultural issue? And then you just go one layer more, and you go one layer more, and then you start to sort of try to at least get to the point of the problem. So what would happen if you were to go into a pub and you didn't drink? Like, what do you think would happen? Oh, my mates would take the piss out of me. Okay, one more layer. And the issue with that is what? It triggers you. You don't have enough confidence to be able to take that. You value what other people think too much, and so on and so on and so on. You can go one more layer and say,
the why ladder. The why ladder.
Yeah, where does that come from? And that's the bit I'm interested in. That's why I started a gym and not an online business, because all you can do online is really worry about the text, and you can't worry about the subtext, which ultimately is the reason behind everything.
The real meaning behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You want to talk about training and nutrition. Training is a discipline issue, and nutrition is a self-respect issue. That's all it is. It's not to do with vitamins and minerals and proteins and calories. It ultimately comes down to your relationship with yourself. And so until that's addressed, not a great deal is going to happen. So this is why I end up talking about this topic an awful lot, because the alcohol almost encompasses it better than anything. And if you're going to look at nutrition, well, then we're fighting millions of years of evolution in a system that's desperate for you to be fat. Whereas with alcohol, there's nothing about your evolution that wants you to drink. It's just a few thousand years of cultural pressure, and you're getting mugged off by the story. And if you can dismantle it, actually, it's incredibly easy to just leave behind. And I tell you, if I was to sum it up in one sentence for someone who's maybe going through the process of trying to give up, if you own it, people don't take it. But if you leave a little crack, they'll take it.
I like that. It's so true. It's so true. So I just want to tap into a little bit about what we touched on a minute ago. You're in this fortunate position, being a gym owner, business owner. You're seeing a lot of people who are coming in through your doors to improve their health and fitness. I've always been a big advocate that sequence is so important, right?
Wow.
And for me, like, there's almost not much point in going into any of the other stuff until you got your physical right. Are we hydrated enough? Are we moving our body and getting oxygen into our blood? Have you sorted your gut out? Are there issues there?
How often are we poisoning it?
Yeah, with things like alcohol and stuff. But, that alone can be a contributor to your mood or your energy levels, or how motivated you are, or how much brain fog or clarity that you have. And so, for me, fitness and health, that is the number one precursor to feeling better or making some kind of lifestyle changes. So my question to you is, what's the difference between the people that can stick to things and can't?
Discipline. And it's the reason we're talking about, if you think about what you're just talking about there with your health and fitness and your physical, that's the top bucket and it overflows into all the others. But the reason why the people like to worry about the ones at the bottom is they're easy. Well, I can buy a coach. That's easy. He can tell me what to do. I mean, I probably won't do it, but it makes me, I actually read this. I didn't read it. I'm rubbish at reading. I listened to it. And they said that when you tell someone you're going to do something and you get a good response, you get the same dopamine response from them being happy that you're going to try it than you do from actually doing it, which is why you may have heard before, like, don't tell people what you're doing because you'll get, and that's what they're doing. I've got a coach. I've got a self-development coach. Oh, good for you. So you're on the path. Secretly, you've actually done fuck all, except you've got 1 or 2 emails from this person or whatever. And people do it in various other ways. But discipline is ultimately the answer to everything. But the reason we don't talk or don't hear about discipline massively often is because it's completely internal. You cannot be externally influenced or you cannot be externally disciplined. You can be externally motivated, but that doesn't last. And if the key to it all comes from you, then how many industries are going to completely capitulate if people figure that out? So that is ultimately every health hack you've ever heard, every diet, every training plan, every 6-week that, 75-day that, calorie counting this, give up carbs that, it's all to mask your lack of discipline. But instead of addressing that, we don't. We keep it in the dark. We make people think that that's nothing to do with it. You're just not quite sure what food you're meant to be eating, which is a load of bollocks. Everyone knows. And we'll just keep them on this merry-go-round of motivation, do something, fail, continue. And, I've said it many times. If discipline and responsibility was talked about as much as calorie and deficit, 95% of personal trainers will go out of business in 3 weeks.
So how do you cultivate self-discipline within your clients?
I can't just do that. That's part of the magic of discipline because it's almost entirely come from you. Now you can... But
correct me if I'm wrong, but you can sharpen the blade of self-discipline within oneself. So if I'm like, Adam, I can't not eat the chocolate cake. I can't get up in the morning. I can't bring myself to do those 10 pull-ups or 3 pull-ups. Help me improve my discipline.
Yeah, you can build momentum and you can start with the little disciplines and then you can grow from there. Now, I always say that I'm not a trainer. I'm just a facilitator of people who want to train. So I can't make you turn up. But when I do, I can make sure it's worth it. And if it is, then it's more likely to happen tomorrow. There's a little discipline. Actually, it's not very little discipline. It's actually quite a big discipline if you can train most days. Now, you can reverse engineer it as well. You could go like the typical cold showers ice bath route. I get in an ice bath every day. It's to sharpen my discipline stick. I do like how it feels. It's a fantastic daily habit that I have. And you could just jump straight into that. Because if you're going to force yourself to do something that you really don't want to every day, that habit will transcend into various other things.
I think that's an interesting one because I think a lot of people, there's a lot of bit of a craze about ice baths at the moment, and
it's become a bit of a parody, which is actually a bit of a shame. Because
in what ways has it become a parody?
Well, because everyone's doing it.
It's just a thing.
Like Wim Hof sold out and went on Channel 4 or BBC or whatever it is and does that absolutely gas show, and it's like, it's kind of lost its sort of. When no one really knew about Wim Hof, it was
become a bit
cool.
Agreed.
And now it's like,
But
God.
I think a lot of people think that the main reason to do, and I mean, this is true, probably the primary reason to do ice baths is because it's good for inflammation and it's good for your body and it's good, has health benefits. But a major secondary reason is to sharpen the blade of discipline. It's like, it's just something to do that is difficult. And if you can do that, then, you know, you might resist the cookie later in the afternoon because you're just a bit better at doing something that's hard.
Yeah. I mean, I would swap it. I'd say the most beneficial thing to it is the mental.
Fine.
And you know what? If you actually do your research, there's more and more research now to say that they're actually not that good for you physically because they inhibit the body's natural inflammatory response to training. And if you want that adaptation process, you don't want to inhibit that.
Why do professional sportsmen still do it?
Well, they don't really know.
You know something they don't.
No, it's not that I know, but it's coming out. And
interesting.
And, it helps with soreness, you know, during competition. So, for example, the boys at the World Cup, they'll be doing them because they're not looking to improve for the World Cup. They're looking to get through the World Cup.
Maintain, yeah.
People at the CrossFit Games who do 4 events a day, you know, they'll have ice baths between because it reduces literally pain. But if you're trying to continually improve, give your body something to adapt to, the science is starting to say that actually ice water may not be that good. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I think whatever benefit ice water may take away from your adaptation process is way overshadowed by your daily discipline of doing the thing itself. Do you know what I mean? So, fine. By the way, I don't really buy into this science massively because I still get in the ice bath every day. I'm just saying that I don't think it is physical first, mental second. I think it's mental first, physical second.
Physical second. What are some of the other things that you can do other than jump in an ice bath to improve your self-discipline?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of why this shit doesn't sell because it's not a particularly...
Not glamorous.
It's not very glamorous. It's also not very plug and play. Like, if you do all of this stuff for the sake of it, you can get in an ice bath every day. You could get up early. But if you don't have this very deep, holistic outlook on the whole thing, it just will eventually end, and then it was all for nothing. And so, you know, I sort of look at self-development sometimes as in reverse and stop putting yourself through self-undevelopment. And the analogy I sort of use is, you know, when we went into lockdown and the world stopped and there weren't as many cars on the road and planes and all the rest of it, and the world seemed to just be reverting back to how it should be, like with unbelievably immediate effect. Like India were talking about being able to see the Himalayas for the first time in 40 years from like 3 weeks of no...
Neighbours were talking to each other.
Humanity
People
was improving.
People were growing vegetables.
Yeah, but just from a purely sort of ecological standpoint, the oceans were recovering. The land was recovering. You know, just from us not completely fucking it from every angle, the world was coming back. And I sort of view us as that. Your body, what it's capable of, its internal processes and everything else, the way of which it's evolved, and it's absolutely unfathomably incredible. Just don't get in its way and see what happens. Stop poisoning it with shit food and alcohol. Please sleep enough. Give it adequate rest. More importantly, move it as much as you possibly can, because that was pretty much its fundamental design, and see what happens. And
it's a bit like, you know, trying to just give the brain a break from all the media or internet or social media or buzz. That can have huge effects if you just, you know, switch off for a couple of days. Also, our gut, our digestive system, you know, if you do a 24, 48 hour fast or maybe a week kind of cleanse and only eat like really clean, good stuff, like the amount of regeneration that goes on, I mean, it's unbelievable.
Just don't get in your own way. Give it a chance. You know, like, you might not think so, but you are a diamond, but you're just covered in a whole heap of shit, and just rinse it just for like a week and just see what starts to happen. See how much you can sparkle. You know, I think we all seem to have this belief that the people that we look up to, or the athletes, or the ones you see on Instagram, or whatever, they're built differently. Nah, they've just not gotten in their way as much as you have. They've just let themselves flourish. Now, talking about subtext, there is subtext to that. There could be external pressure, there could be parental pressure, there could be societal pressure. You might want to pursue your dream, but you might also have a fucking mortgage that you got into too early and now you're stuck, and that was because someone told you should buy a house because apparently that's important, or all these sorts of things could be reasons why, and they could add up and all the rest of it. But yeah, I never look at self-development as development. I look at it as the less you can get in the way, and the more you can just let this thing do its thing. The more, if you look into what the body does and how it can change in such, how it can regenerate. Smokers who stop smoking, how quickly their lungs can regenerate if past a certain point.
Even trying to get clear on something and you're unsure or trying to find answers, if you just let go a little bit and sleep on it, go for a run, subconsciously it kind of helps you figure things out, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. Just please. I mean, first and foremost, and we talked about it, it's the top bucket. Move, exercise, train. It's one of the fundamental experiences of life. And sometimes, and this is, partly where my sort of parents give me this perspective. And I often think that if we looked at health and fitness as more of an art than a science, I actually think we would get on a lot better with it. You don't listen to music with a goal, and you don't look at a piece of art with a goal. It is. It just
you do it
is.
Because it's enjoyable.
You do because it is part of what makes up the beautiful tapestry of life, and without it, it would be terribly dull. You do not,
I saw one of your posts actually when you spoke about this. It's like, no, I'm so grateful to be able to move my body. It's a pleasure. I don't miss a workout. Yeah. It's a privilege.
I really do feel like it is. And like I say, if we were to sort of just view it as more of a fundamental experience to a good life than an addition if we have time for, or something to help us achieve some sort of external goal that someone else has told us we should do anyway, like lose weight, we'd have a much better relationship with it. And to be totally honest, I don't think my industry is doing a great job at promoting that at the moment, which is, when I do get an invite from someone like you to speak about it on a platform, I do bite your hand off, because I do feel like
You're
this
passionate.
needs to get
It
needs to get out there. It needs to get out there somewhere, because it's it's a slippery slope. It happens in other industries too, but I'm obviously acutely aware of it in mine. But I'm sure you might have seen it too, where we're in a very dangerous place where the hierarchy of industry is now basically based upon who can make the most engaging content for an ever depreciating attention span of the audience. And that's a dangerous place to be. That means that the people at the top who are getting listened to have gotten there through, don't get me wrong, some sort of skill, but not through fundamental knowledge, through being able to hook people in, through engagement,
and leveraging human beings, quick fixes.
Totally.
The chimp
I'm
brain.
going to show you how McDonald's can help you lose fat.
Dopamine.
Oh, bloody hell. I'll watch that video.
Instant gratification, all of that.
All that sort of stuff.
Just going back to self-discipline, I really liked something that Jocko Willink, who's I think he's an ex-Navy SEAL, his catchphrase, discipline equals freedom, is quite a nice book that's super easy to read, lots of pictures and quotes and things like that, but quite powerful. And one of the things that always stuck in my mind was him explaining that, when you wake up in the morning and maybe it's quite cold outside, and that warm blanket or warm duvet over you, like, we are wired and conditioned prehistorically to want to like that and stay there. And it's almost like, once we understand that is how we are wired, and we need to fight against that inertia of the laziness and the comfort, and to stay warm and not to go outside in the rain and in the dark and go on a run or whatever it is, get up early. It's like that warm blanket is like evil.
Yeah.
Maybe not evil. He doesn't use that words, but like that is what you need to push hard against.
Yeah.
And I really like that. It's just a little analogy, like, yeah, those soft, easy, nice things. That's what you got to, that's the inertia that you got to push back against. Yeah. And, you know, jumping in an ice bath.
It's the same principle.
It's the same principle.
It's your little bitch of life that's just trying to sort of, to keep you down. And it's very, actually, when you kind of look at it, it's very interesting when you look at it evolutionarily. You know, like, we never had ample food. So if we did find it, we'd gorge. You know, you had to make a fire. Sometimes you wouldn't. So if you did, you'd stay around it for a long time. And, you know, if you were to just drop off a dead impala in front of a cheetah every day, they're not just going to go, nah, that's too easy, I'm going to go hunt. They'd be like, fuck, this is fucking sweet.
Yeah, you gobble it all up.
Yeah, I'd gobble it all up. And if you gave them 2, he'd probably eat 2. And in 6 weeks' time, you have an overweight cheetah for the first time in the history of, you know, animals. And that's what Tesco is for us. You know, that's and I said it earlier, we're fighting against millions of years of evolution to basically prepare for a famine and to gorge when we finally have a chance. And unfortunately, the famine isn't coming anymore. And if we want to gorge, we absolutely can. There's absolutely no reason for us to give in to our primeval urge to move, because the reason why we have a primeval urge to move is to basically find food. Well, if it's there, then now we have to go out of our way. So it's just exactly the same. It's exactly the same thing. But the bottom line is, I mean, people think it's kind of a bit negative and a bit depressing. I think it's fantastically liberating that everything you could ever need is you're either already capable of or already within you. You just have to fucking do it. And discipline,
a lot of it doesn't require money.
Discipline takes care of it takes care of everything. And it's not, you know, it's a bit like the ice bath thing. It might have become a kind of a bit of a meme or a bit of a parody in itself. And, you know, you could probably make memes out of this chat with me banging on about it too. And it can lose its power, but it takes care of your training. It takes care of your food. It takes care of your alcohol consumption. It takes care of drugs. It takes care of sleep. It takes care of relationships. You put up boundaries. You don't take shit from people. You know who you are. You have boundaries. This is who I am, whether or not you like it or not, whether or not you're in my life or not. This is who I am. This is where I'm going to go. You know, it takes care of absolutely everything. But, you know, my industry in particular, but an awful lot more. I mean, we can go real sinister if you want with Big Pharma and food. They'd collapse if this practice was, or I should say this principle was practiced, you know, across the board. You know, there are lots of industries that would be in an awful lot of trouble if they just did what they are fully aware they should do, if they had enough. And then, of course, the whole thing is an absolute snowball because, you know, I remember when I first gave up drinking, I gained an almost obnoxious level of self-worth, and it just spilled into absolutely everything in terms of who I hung out with, you know, in terms of like time wasters or people who I didn't feel deserved my time or energy or respect or whatever it was. Completely took care of my food. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I said it earlier, it's not like I eat chicken and broccoli all day, far from it, but, you know, it's not a debate like, oh fuck, I'd love a biscuit. No, I wouldn't love a biscuit.
You're not being reactive about everything. I think if you're drinking and, you know, and you're not on top of your shit and, you know, you're doing what people say and, you know, you're going through life and, you know, you're in that sort of default, I suppose, behavioral flywheel.
Yeah.
Like if an example of not drinking and then, you know, that ladder of, you know, upward spiral of self-worth, self-confidence, having more time, you know, being more deliberate about what you do and where you are. And, you know, you start, I suppose, questioning things and not taking things. And, you know, why should I listen to him? And, you know, what's behind that media? And what you know, should you buy a house? Or, you know, should you be doing this? Or, you know, should you be eating this stuff? Or should you be hanging out with these people? And I think, you know, that is quite interesting. So, you know, what's next for you? You know, you've got a really thriving gym in Henley. You know, you're quite present on social media. You know, you're trying to build your profile. Like, where does Lubsy want to be in the next 2, 3, 5 years? You know, what's your mission? Where do you want to grow to?
Good question. Well, if you were to ask me 2 or 3 years ago or 5 years ago, where do you see yourself in 2 or 3 or 5 years? I probably wouldn't have said where I am now. So I am going to stick to the same mantra that's sort of got me here so far, and it's, to be honest, an extension of how we treat our our members, or as we call them, squaddies, which is turn up, try hard, be good, do what you're supposed to do, and see what happens. I'm pretty sure it'll be good. Without getting too sort of wrapped up in concrete future plans, I think if I can fulfill my responsibility and my obligations to my family, my community, my wider community, enough times in a row, enough days in a row, it's going to lead to something great. Has done so far. Where it's going to lead in another 2 or 3 years, well, we'll have to catch up and see. But I'm looking forward to seeing what it is, for sure.
I like that. I mean, that's good enough. You don't need to say any more than that. That's beautiful. And I think what's really nice is that you're embracing where you are and what you're doing. You know, one doesn't need to have like, oh, you know, now I need to get here and now I need to get there. You know, I can feel from meeting you for the first time and talking to you, you're a very impressive young man, Adam. You know, you'd have a lot of responsibility. I think it's touching hearing about your autistic brother, and I think how that's given you a lot of perspective on life and people, and you are a very responsible guy to your family, and you're very proud of that, and your squaddies, and you know, you care a lot, and you're investing in these people, and I think that's clearly, you know, a big part of your success. I can actually relate. My sister's autistic, and I grew up with a younger sister who's autistic, and yeah, you know, Nina, she struggles with things, and you know, there's obviously there's a spectrum of autism and whatnot, but it definitely, you know, whenever one's thinking, oh, you know, poor me, and what about this and what about that, you know, I only have to think about my little sister, be like, shit, so lucky, just so lucky. You know, she'll never have, you know, a lot of the things that you and I take for granted and enjoy and etc. So it definitely gives a lot of perspective. Maybe we should do a separate podcast on that.
Yeah, totally. Well, actually, I really want to start a group, or it could even just be a Facebook page or something for siblings of autistic people, because I think there's
a lot of touch points.
It is an awfully unique perspective that it gives you, but it's not really addressed awfully often, because you know, it's usually the parents, and they're dealing with this change.
Yeah.
What isn't usually spoken about too much is what it's like when you don't know any different. And you know, yeah, we could have our own completely separate, you know, podcast and all this sort of stuff, but just like I'll just give you one quick example. Ali's thing is basically videos and DVDs. Still got VHSs. We've got like 10 backed up if they break and stuff like that. And he likes watching the credits, and he likes writing the credits, and he likes doing incredible drawings, and he still does now, amongst various other things. But it basically means that any free wall space in my parents' house is shelved with DVDs or videos. But when we were growing up, he had like the downstairs, what would have been the lounge or something, and the conservatory was all his, and it was just walled. And I remember going to friends' houses when I was like 6 or 7 and being like, do you not have a video room? Like, where's your... Oh, is no one here autistic? Oh, right. So what, you'll just sit and eat dinner together at... Wow. Sounds very normal and, dare I say, a tad boring.
Yeah. It's very rare that you have two people like us talking about our autistic siblings. You know, normally you're talking to someone who doesn't have that or doesn't understand it, and it's a completely different dynamic. I mean, so I know this podcast is very much about you, but I just can't help but relate. You know, Nina, my sister, she's a bit of a hoarder, and she's obsessed with DVDs, the old VHSs.
Oh yeah, there you go.
The loft, the bedroom, you know, she's got
and it's all in the right order.
Mobile home in the garden, full of it all.
I bet if you went in and took one,
she'd know.
She would know.
She knows. She's sharp as anything. But then there's always superpowers that you hear about with autistic kids. And Nina's one of her superpowers is that she's got the most amazing memories. She can remember from scenarios about when she was like 2 years old or 3 years old. She can remember people, places, you know, the blue door of the house that we used to live in London, you know, when she was 2. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Or a trip that we went on in Scotland where she, you know, she really shouldn't remember those details and things. Which is
I mean,
amazing.
I don't think they have superpowers. I think autism is a legit superpower, and I think it actually makes me sick sometimes that we consider it to be a disability from our perspective, when the general public would spend more on a pair of jeans that are already ripped or can't stop digesting this shit that they already know is poisonous for them, or, you know, the list goes on and on and on. And there we have the audacity to put them in a box and say that they're disabled. They're only disabled for the world of which we have built. And, you know, sometimes I think, you know what, mate, I'm not surprised you're confused and you can't communicate, because, you know, when someone goes on a date and they really like them, do they tell them? No, don't want to seem too keen. They wait and they don't tell them how they feel to string them along. And then they wait when it's 6 weeks and then it's too late. Oh, yeah, I can see how people, and yeah, I can see why you're confused, boss. It's an absolute ridiculous.
And then when they do decide that they want to tell them that they like them, and then the other person does, and they feel the confidence to, then they get scared and run away from the commitment anyway, right?
Yeah, but yeah, they're the ones who are disabled. Yeah, and we've got it absolutely. Yeah, spot on.
I can see on your T-shirt, music for autism. What's that?
Yeah, so that kind of encompasses everything. So that was off the back of
family,
Ali,
the parents,
Mum and Dad
Ali
created a charity. Well, where it came from was they noticed the profound effect that music had on Ali, and they were in a position to obviously provide that. And of course, concert halls are great, but they're not massively welcoming for people with autism and things like that. I think they're getting better, and cinemas are also doing the same with having special showings and stuff like that, which is absolutely great to see. But they decided to try and basically either create special concerts specifically for children and adults with autism, or going into schools, and that was over 20 years ago now, and they've done concerts for probably 200,000 children up and down the country.
Wow.
And you know,
special,
it's almost revolutionary what they're
special
doing.
viewings just for autistic kids, or
sometimes mostly going into special schools.
Yeah,
and just doing it for the school.
Going to the schools.
Going to the school.
Got it.
Yeah, they have done sort of, but of course that also has its own. You know, providing an autism special concert. It's not as simple as that, because you know they're ultimately they are autistic, and so big rooms and big challenges. You know, challenges, but doing it in their safe space is amazing, and you know some of the results they are getting from them I mean, it's borderline revolutionary. You know,
wow.
There are kids who have never sitting still, and there are also kids who have never made a sound who are laughing. Or it's the most unbelievable thing. And again, it's a bit like why I wish we'd kind of look at health and fitness the way we look at music and things like that, because I think it has that power. But we're so fucking wrapped up in this calorie deficit shit that we can't see past it and see the true power of what it could genuinely do for the whole of humanity. So we are trustees of that charity. We do at least one fundraiser a year via the gym. So in the last 3 years, we've probably raised about £45,000, something like that. It's usually me doing a fucking daft fitness challenge. Last year was a 24-hour challenge. Year before that was to celebrate all of the kids that we had helped. I sort of ran, biked, skied, burpeed the sort of same amount of kids. It was like 150,000 or something. So that was good. We just did a golf day this year, so giving fatigue, but it still worked really well. Something different. But yeah, I've aren't too many things that my dad's ever lectured me about. Don't be late, which is why I was early today. And if you're in a position to give back, it's not a choice. You must. And so we're very proud to do it.
Can you share, I mean, you obviously live this whole health, fitness, personal development space. Can you give my listeners some nuggets, some tips, you know, any kind of resources, whether it's a great book or a great podcast or a tip, a hack, anything that you'd like to share?
Well, if I was to write a book, it'd probably be called The Bulletproof 5. Wake up early, train, don't drink, eat like a grown-up, cold water. Try them. I'm pretty sure in not even 6 weeks, 2 weeks, 90% of the issues that are going on will be manageable, and the rest of them will probably be gone in a month. And if there's still one left, well, then at least you know it's a real problem. But I don't see life getting anything other than significantly better if you do those 5 things. You can look at it and take it with a pinch of salt or brush it off, whatever you want. But I don't know anyone who's doing those 5 things that are struggling. In terms of books and podcasts, sorry to be terribly wanky, but I sometimes use this quote. Beethoven wrote his best music when he went completely deaf. In other words, when he could only hear his internal vision, thought, heart, did he actually create his best work. And so actually the less, it's more of a sort of social media and a consumption thing, but the less I've tried to sort of consume, the more I've been able to sort of follow my own heart, refine my own message. And that's not to say that you shouldn't educate yourself, but I kind of talked about that silly show that I was watching earlier that confused you about opera. That's more of an angle in which I'm going to go, not finding out someone in my field who's 3 years down the line what they did, because I'll end up just doing what they did, and therefore nothing new.
It's not
even
authentic
if it's good.
or original. Yeah.
It's the same reason why I don't wear a smartwatch. I don't need a watch to tell me whether or not I've had a good night's sleep. I'll know whether or not I've had a good night's sleep when I wake up. And the more I rely on something external to tell me whether I'm doing well, the less I can truly hear my
intuition.
My intuition. Yeah.
I love it. Adam, thanks a million. It's been great to meet you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers, boss.